You know what time it is. Woo! Get into it! Get into it! Yes! We are back. We're back, lovelies. We are back with another edition of Storytime with Chris. And like I always say, you don't have to watch these videos when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them in your downtime, nap time, max, relax, and chillax time, in between time, mean time, scheme time, study time, break time, CP time, any time that you want to hear a highly animated voice bring you wonderful stories of magic, fantasy, science fiction, adventure, and many, many more in between. And no, I don't own the music that you're hearing in the background, which is brought to you by my mysterious guitar plucker. Yes, he's back. He is amazing. Now, without further ado, considering that we are technically due for some severe weather and tornadoes for those who are local or in the nearby areas of Dayton, Cincinnati, and Columbus, please be sure to lock your windows, close your doors, get to a basement or a bathroom or a secluded place in which there is protection, okay? It's important. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. We're back, and this guy named Jacques, who has been disguised clearly to be Count Olaf, he is about to be burned at the stake by the village of foul devotees, because that's technically what they do. Like, when you break a rule, they burn you at the stake. They've got like hundreds of thousands of rules. It's ridiculous. You know what? I'm going to keep that thought to myself. I was going to say something, but I'm going to keep that thought to myself. I'm going to keep that thought to myself. Anyway, let's go ahead and begin. Chapter 7. In this large and fierce world of ours, there are many, many unpleasant places to be. You could be in a river swarming with angry electric eels, or in a supermarket filled with vicious long-distance runners. You could be in a hotel that has no room service. Or you could be lost in a forest that is slowly filling up with water. You could be in a hornet's nest, or in an abandoned airport, or in the office of a pediatric surgeon. But one of the most unpleasant things that can happen is to find yourself in a quandary, which is where the Baudelaire orphans found themselves that night. Finding yourself in a quandary means that everything seems confusing and dangerous, and you don't know what in the world to do about it, and it is one of the most worst unpleasantries you can encounter. The three Baudelaires sat in Hector's kitchen as the handyman prepared another Mexican dinner, and compared with the quandary they were in, all their other problems felt like the small potatoes he was chopping into thirds. "Everything seems so confusing," Violet said glumly. "The Quagmire triplets are somewhere nearby, but we don't know where. The only clues we have are two confusing poems. And now there's a man who isn't Count Olaf, but he has an eye tattoo on his ankle, and he wanted to tell us something about our parents." "It's more than confusing," Klaus said. "It's dangerous. We need to rescue the Quagmires before Count Olaf does something dreadful. And we need to convince the Council of Elders that the man they arrested is really Jacques. Otherwise, they'll burn him at the stake." "Quandary," Sunny said, which meant something along the lines of, "What in the world can we do about it?" "I don't know what we can do about it, Sunny," Violet replied. "We spent all day trying to figure out what the poems meant, and we tried our best to convince the Council of Elders that Officer Luciana made a mistake." She and her siblings looked at Hector, who had certainly not tried his best with the Council of Elders, but instead had sat in his folding chair without saying a word. Hector sighed and looked unhappily at the children. "I know I should have said something," he told them, "but I was far too skittish. The Council of Elders is so imposing that I could never say a word in their presence. However, I can think of something that we can do to help." "What is it?" Klaus asked. "We can enjoy these huevos rancheros," he said, which actually sounds really good. "Huevos rancheros are fried eggs and beans served with tortillas and potatoes and a spicy tomato sauce." Actually, that might be something I'll make later this week. I'm not gonna lie, that does sound really good. Huevos rancheros. Some arroz y frijoles. Like at the Ranchos de Frites Rojas. Never mind. We're going back. The siblings looked at one another, trying to imagine how a Mexican dish would get them out of their quandary. "How will that help?" Violet asked doubtfully. "I don't know," Hector admitted, "but they're almost ready, and my recipe is a delicious one if I do say so myself. Come on, let's eat. Maybe a good dinner will help you think of something." The children sighed, but nodded their heads in agreement, and got up to set at the table, and curiously enough, a good dinner did in fact help the Baudelaires think of something. As Violet took her first bite of beans, she felt the gears and levers of her inventing brain spring into action. As Klaus dipped his tortilla in the spicy tomato sauce, he began to think of books he had read that might be helpful. Ooh, look at that ominous thunder playing in the background. We're doing real good. In a sunny, smeared egg yolks all over her face, she clicked her 4 sharp teeth together and tried to think of a way that might be useful. By the time the Baudelaires were finished the meal Hector had prepared for them, their ideas had grown and developed into full-fledged plans. Just as Nevermore Tree had grown a long time ago from a tiny seed, and Foul Fountain had been built recently from somebody's hideous blueprint. It was Sunny who spoke up first. "A plan," she said. "What is it, Sunny?" Klaus asked. With a tiny finger covered in tomato sauce, Sunny pointed out the window at Nevermore Tree, which was covered in the VFD crows, as it was every evening. "Mergen, sir," she said firmly. "My sister says that tomorrow morning there'll probably be another poem from Isadora in the same spot," Klaus explained to Hector. Switched voices. "She wants to spend the night underneath the tree. She's so small that whoever is delivering the poems probably won't spot her, and she'll be able to find out how the couplets are getting to us." "And that should bring us closer to finding the Quagmires," Violet said. "That's a good plan, Sunny." "My goodness, Sunny," Hector said. "Won't you be frightened spending all night underneath a whole murder of crows?" "Farewell," Sunny said, which meant, "Won't be any more frightening than the time I climbed up an elevator shaft with my teeth," if you remember from the previous book, the ersatz elevator. "I think I have a good plan, too," Klaus said. "Hector, yesterday you told us about the secret library you have in the barn." "Shh," Hector said, looking around the kitchen. "Not so loud. You know it's against the rules to have all those books. And I don't want to be burned at the stake." Which, by the way, there were people who were burned at the stake for reading. That was a thing. In the, I want to say the early 1800s, mid-1800s, there was a man by the name of William Tyndale who was burned at the stake, get this, for turning the Bible into English. That was a thing. He was burned at the stake because at the time, the nobility and the aristocracy did not want the serfs and the gentry and the peasants to learn how to read and write, because then they can vote for laws and all sorts of legislature. It's just terrible. Yeah, they burned him at the stake. Yes, they did. And if they burned me at the stake, I would hope you would put on some seasoning, some Tony Chachere's, some black pepper, you know what I'm saying, a little bit of vegetable oil, maybe some curry powder. "I don't want anyone to be burned at the stake," Klaus said. "Now, does the secret library contain books about the rules of VFD?" "Absolutely," Hector said. "Lots of them, because the rule book describes people breaking the rules. They break rule number 108, which clearly states that the VFD library cannot contain any books that break any of the rules." "Well, I'm going to read as many rule books as I can," Klaus said. "There must be a way to save Jacques from being burned at the stake, and I'll bet I'll find it in the pages of these books." "My word, Klaus," Hector said. "Won't you be bored reading all those rule books?" "I won't be any more boring than the time I had to read all about grammar in order to save Aunt Josephine," he replied. "Sunny is working to save the Quagmires," Violet said, "and Klaus is working to save Jacques. I've got to work to save us." "What do you mean?" Klaus asked. "Well, I think Count Olaf must be behind all this trouble," Violet said. "Grabby," Sunny said, which meant, as usual. "If the town of VFD burns Jacques at the stake," Violet continued, "then everyone will think Count Olaf is dead. I bet the Daily Punctilio will even have a story that says so. It will be very good news for Olaf, the real one, that is. Everyone thinks he's dead. Olaf can be as treacherous as he likes, and the authorities won't come looking for him." "That's true," Klaus said. "Count Olaf must have found Jacques, whoever he is, and brought him into town. He knew that Officer Luciano would think he was Olaf, but what does that have to do with saving us?" "Well, if we rescue the Quagmires and prove that Jacques is innocent," Violet said, "Count Olaf will come after us, and we can't rely on the Council of Elders to protect us." "Poe," Sunny said. "Oh, Mr. Poe," Violet agreed. "That's why we'll need a way to save ourselves." She turned to Hector. "Yesterday you told us about your self-sustaining hot air mobile home." Hector looked around the kitchen again to make sure nobody was listening. It's typically what I do when I'm alone.
Yes, he said, but I think I'm going to stop working on it. If the Council of Elders learns that I'm breaking rule number 67, I could be burned at the stake. Anyway, I can't seem to get the engine to work.
Oh, excuse me. If you don't mind, I'd like to take a look at it, Violet said. Maybe I can help finish it. You wanted to use the self-standing hot air mobile home to escape from VFD and the Council of Elders and everything else that makes you skittish, but it would also make an excellent escape vehicle.
Maybe it could be both, Hector said shyly and reached across the table to pat Sunny on the shoulder. I very much enjoy the company of you 3 children, and it would be delightful to share a mobile home with you. There's plenty of room in the self-standing hot air mobile home, and once we get it to work, we can launch it and never come down. Count Olaf and his associates would never be able to bother you again. What do you think?
The 3 Baudelaires listened closely to Hector's suggestion, but when they tried to tell him what they thought, it felt like they were in a quandary all over again. On one hand, it would be exciting to live in such an unusual way, and the thought of being safe forever from Count Olaf's evil clutches was very appealing, to say the least. Violet looked at her baby sister and thought about the promise she had made when Sunny was born, that she would always look after her younger siblings and make sure they wouldn't get into trouble. Klaus looked at Hector, who was the only citizen in this vile village, title drop, who really seemed to care about the children as a guardian should. And Sunny looked out the window at the evening sky and remembered the first time she and her siblings saw the VFD crows fly in superlative circles and wished that they, too, could escape from all their worries. But on the other hand, the Baudelaires felt that flying away from all their trouble and living forever up in the sky didn't seem to be a proper way to live one's life. Sunny was a baby, Klaus was only 12, and even Violet, the eldest, was 14, which is not really so old. The Baudelaires had many things they had hoped to accomplish from the ground, and they weren't sure that they could simply abandon all those hopes so early in their lives. The Baudelaires sat at the table, thought about Hector's plan, and it seemed to the children that if they spent the rest of their lives floating around the heavens, they simply wouldn't be in their element, a phrase which here means in the sort of home the 3 siblings would prefer. Honestly, I've never been in a hot air balloon, so the idea of a hot air mobile home sounds pretty awesome. I get my own kitchen, and I get to float in the sky. Sounds pretty awesome. First things first, Violet said finally, hoping she wasn't hurting Hector's feelings. Before we make a decision about the rest of our lives, let's get Duncan and Isadora out of Olaf's clutches. Make sure Jacques won't be burned at the stake, Klaus said. I'll be calm, Sunny added, which meant something like, and let's solve the mystery of VFD that the Quagmires told us about. Hector sighed.
You're right, he said. Those things are more important, even if they do make me skittish. Well, let's take Sunny to the tree, and then it's off to the barn, where the library and inventing studio are. Looks like it's going to be another long night, but hopefully this time we won't be barking up the wrong tree.
The Baudelaires smiled at the handyman and followed him into the night, which was cool and breezy and filled with the sounds of the murder of crows settling down for the night. They kept on smiling as they separated, with Sunny crawling toward Nevermore Tree and the 2 older Baudelaires following Hector to the barn, and they continued to smile as they began to put each of their plans into action. Violet smiled because Hector's inventing studio was very well equipped, with plenty of pliers and glue and wire and everything her inventing brain needed. And because Hector's self-sustaining hot air mobile home was an enormous, fascinating machine, just the sort of challenging invention she loved to work on. Klaus smiled because Hector's library was very comfortable with some good sturdy tables and cushioned chairs, just perfect for reading in, and because the books of the rules of VFD were very thick and full of difficult words, just the sort of challenging reading he enjoyed. And Sunny smiled because there were several dead branches of Nevermore Tree that had fallen to the ground, so she would have something to gnaw on as she hid and waited for the next couplet to arrive. The children were in their elements. Violet was in her element at the inventing studio, and Klaus was in his element at the library, and Sunny was in hers just from being low to the ground and near something she could bite. Violet tied her hair up in a ribbon to keep it out of her eyes, and Klaus polished his glasses, and Sunny stretched her mouth to get her teeth ready for the task ahead of her. And the 3 children smiled once more than they had since they arrived in town. The Baudelaire orphans were in their elements, and they hoped that being in their elements would lead them out of their quandary. is where we will end for today. As always, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you all next time. Please be safe tonight, okay? Bye-bye.